Hey, what's going on everybody? Joshua here. Today I'm going to show you how to build a YouTube scraper using Bubble as our front end. We'll be using make.com as our back end, which is going to be coordinating some of those API calls. And we're going to be using Apify, which is a scraping service. They have a bunch of different platforms on here, so you could scrape Instagram, Facebook. In our case, we'll be focusing on YouTube to get a transcript. So let's get into how it works really quickly. So I'm going to paste a YouTube URL. So this is a very simple front end that I built on Bubble. We'll click Get Summary, and what's going to happen here is it's going to send that data over to Make via a webhook. We're going to get the transcript from YouTube using Apify. We're going to summarize that transcript, and then we're going to send that data back into Bubble. So there we can see our summary has returned. So we have the video, we have a quick overview, some main takeaways, and then some additional information. Again, the main goal of this video is just really to show you how to connect both Bubble and Make. Make is an incredible tool that has thousands of apps on it, and Bubble obviously has its own benefits, but you can build custom UIs and then do incredible things with Make. So I just want to show how you can pass data between those two and build something cool in the process. So if that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned and let's get into it. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build out our front end in Bubble. So you'll want to create a Bubble account if you don't have one. And once you get to a page like this, or you see a button that says create an app, click that and we'll get into it. So I'm going to call this scrape tube, and we'll say start with basic features. And if we go over to our app really quickly, so we have this input, we have this button, and then if I go back over here to the one we just showed you, basically we have this video, and we have this kind of area for the summary, right? So these are two different views that we're going to build out really quickly. So if we go back over to our new application we just created, you can click Skip Application Assistant. So this is the Bubble editor. I'm going to double click the page and where it's selected index. I'm going to go to layout and I'm going to set that to column. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow like any element that you add to it, it's just going to stack it. So first thing we're going to add is an input. We're going to build out that little input button combo. So here's that. We'll search for button. We'll put that in right there. And then we'll add some text to give some instruction to the user. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to click on layout when an element is selected. And this is how you can move things around when it's in this column layout form. So in this text, we'll just say enter YouTube URL. Here, we can leave that as is, and then on the button, let's just say get summary. Cool. So I'm going to select all of these by holding shift and then clicking everything. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say group elements in a column container. And again, this container column is essentially just like stacking everything. You can also do row, which will set everything side by side. But again, we want to use the column stacked view. Okay, so that's our first section. It doesn't look great, but for now we're just getting the pieces on the page. So I'm going to rename this as well. Let's call this group URL form. And now I'm going to copy this and then I'm going to paste it again onto the page. So I just Command C and then Command V, and we're going to build out this little piece right here. So we have a video and then we have this like container with some text inside. So if I go back right here, basically we're going to search for video over here. I'm going to grab a video and you just click inside that container. Again, we can delete this other stuff out like that, but now we have that video in there, and the next thing we need to add in is some text. So let's, I guess, just select this again. We'll paste that in. We'll call this summary. We'll give this some hierarchy. So let's set this to like a heading 4, and then we'll just kind of copy and paste a few more. So this will be then that subheading that we have. Where is it? Right here. So we've got like summary, we've got some text, and then some other sort of headings right there. So let's go back. I guess we'll just set this to the body to start, and then we'll do, this is like key points, copy that one, and then we'll just do that one more time. Boom. So we have our key points. This will be the additional information section, additional info, and I cannot type additional info, and we'll call this one additional info text. And I'm just setting these as like placeholders because then once we start moving data from make.com, we'll insert it in that text element. So we'll call this key details text. Call this one summary text. And so what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to select all of these different text elements. And a pro tip when selecting things is to start top down, because Bubble adds these little tags in front of everything. It makes it hard to click. So I'm going to uncheck fit content with, and this is just good practice because then when you think about being responsive, it's going to allow things to adjust to the parent container's width. Okay, we have these sections. What I'm going to do is, now that we have our summary and summary text, I'm actually going to put these in their own group. So I'm going to put that in a column container. Then I'll take these two, right click, put in a column container, and then same for additional info. We'll put that in a column container. So group elements, column container. And again, this is just kind of creating sections so I can easily manage and organize the structure of my page here. So we'll call this one group additional info. We'll call this one group key points. And it's always good practice to rename your layers. Summary, cool. And then we have our video. And then we have, this is kind of like our bigger block container right here. So we'll just call this summary container. Nice. So this all is here, but it looks like crap. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna add a little bit of styling to it, just to give a little more breathing room and make it look just very slightly nicer. So I selected add spacing. What we're gonna do is we're gonna set this to like, let's say 12. That's just gonna space everything out about 12 pixels. On the video, if we select that, we're gonna uncheck keep this element fixed width, and we're gonna also check keep element aspect ratio. I'm going to set this to 16:9, so that'll maintain a nice video ratio. Obviously that is massive. So on this summary container, actually, here's what we'll do. We're going to take these and let's do the same thing. Let's uncheck the fixed width. So just select them and then check it, uncheck it, and that will allow everything to expand. We're going to group these two groups in another column container. And this is going to act as the parent. And so now that everything is expanded super wide, we're going to set a max width on this parent container. So we'll say main container. This has got the group of everything. We're going to set a max width, and let's just set this to 560. And there you can see now that's kind of setting the width of everything else. And so I'm going to add gap spacing here. We'll say like 40 for that. And now we can see that we have our different sort of sections being maintained, and we'll just kind of center this. And then we'll add a bit of padding. So let's just do like 32, 32, 32, 32. Okay, great. Still doesn't look amazing, but at least we have sort of the core structure and everything built out. I'll also add a little bit of gap spacing on this top group form. So let's add like 12 to that. Okay, perfect. So now that we have all of that, we need to get Bubble talking to make.com. So there's a number of ways to do this, and I'm going to show you the two approaches that I believe work best. So there's sending data to Make from Bubble, and then there's returning data from Make to Bubble. So when you send data to Make, I believe the best way to do that is via a webhook. So we're going to set that up first. So let's go over to make.com. I'm going to create a new scenario because I'm going to do this with you. Let's go over here. Let's click create new scenario. The first thing we're going to add on here is a webhook, and we'll say custom webhook. What that's going to do is we're going to click add, and I would name it accordingly. So we'll call this one scrape tuba webhook. I'm going to click OK, and what that's going to do is it's going to give me this URL right here. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back over into Bubble. Whoops, over here. I'm going to pull this all the way over. There we go. So first, let's go into our plugins, and you're going to need to click add plugin, and we're going to search for the API connector. So search API connector. It's going to show up for some reason at the very bottom, but we'll click install on that, close out of that. And here we have Bubble's API connector. What you're going to do is you're going to click add another API. We'll call this make.com. We'll leave everything as is right up here, but then on this new section, API call, let's expand that. And we're going to say send summary. And so essentially what this is going to do is we're going to send data to that webhook. And so you're going to paste in the URL from Make that you copied. We're going to change this to action, this use as, we'll set that to action, and I'll explain that here in just a little bit. And we're going to add a few parameters here. So these are the values that we're going to be sending from Bubble into Make. So the first thing is the URL. And for now, we can just say like youtube.com because we're essentially needing to just initialize it first. We're going to uncheck private. And then the other piece of data we want to send is an ID. And I'll explain this here in a little bit, but we're just setting it up for now. So we'll set ID, uncheck private. And so if we look at Make real quick, right now it's listening. So it's waiting to essentially like get some information and determine the structure of what's going to be coming into it. And so now that we have this all set up, we're going to click initialize call. And Bubble's going to tell you there was an issue, but if we go over here to Make, it'll say successfully determined. The reason why it says there's an issue is typically a webhook will return some sort of like status or information about it working, and it seems that Make's webhook doesn't do that, at least in this initial setup. So we'll just click OK. Once you do that, we're going to go over here and we're going to change the data type to empty. And that just allowed us to set it up. And now that it's not returning anything, we'll set that to empty and it will continue to work as needed. So once you've set that to empty, go back over to make.com. We'll click OK. We're going to run this really quickly just to kind of see it work. So now that that's listening, we're going to go back over and we're going to initialize our call again. So that kind of just processed through. If we go over here to make, we'll see that it has captured something, and we'll see that it's got those parameters that we just sent. So there's the URL and then the ID. Cool. So that is a very quick way of how you're going to send data to Make. But the next part is we need to return data. And I want to go through this really quickly because this is an important part. And I imagine if you're watching this video, this might be one of your questions of how do you actually connect Bubble to Make. And so I want to get to that sooner than later in the video. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back over to our Bubble app. And in order to essentially update things within your Bubble database via Make, you need to be on an upgraded plan. And so over here in settings, you can upgrade it. Bubble offers a 14-day trial. And so you'll need to essentially upgrade your plan to do this. Again, set a reminder so you don't get charged. But what we'll do is we'll click change plan and we'll go to starter right here. We'll upgrade really quickly. Again, set a reminder because I've got plenty of apps that I don't cancel in time. But what that does is it's going to expose some functionality that's not in the free plan. So if we go over here into this section called API, you're going to want to enable data API, okay? And that essentially just allows Bubble to connect to other services similar to any other API. And what we'll do here is we'll click generate a API token. And we can copy this because we're going to go paste it into Make. So if we go over into Make, let's add a Bubble module. So we'll add module, search Bubble. Let's just say create or update a thing. And mainly we're just trying to create a connection with Bubble. We're not really going to do anything at the moment. So let's click add. We'll name this connection Scrape Tuba or whatever you want to name your app. We'll set the application domain. So this is basically if your app is on a custom domain, you'd want to set that. But for now, we're just on Bubble's domain, so that's fine. The application name is going to be essentially what you've set, and it'll be in this ID right here. So this is Scrape Tuba, so I'm going to copy that right there. I will paste it into Make, and then we're going to paste in that API token that we just got right here. So this private key, so copy that, go back into Make, paste that in. We're going to leave the environment as development. I'm going to click save. You're going to get an error, but I'm going to explain sort of how to fix it. Make has this interesting way of connecting to Bubble. And so what you have to do now is go back over into your Bubble app. We're going to go to the data tab right here, and we're going to click in data types. We're going to create a new thing, and we're going to call this my table. Okay, so we'll click create. Once you've created that data thing, you'll see it right here. We're going to say new field, and we're going to call this one email. We'll set that to text. We'll click create. And what we're going to do is go over to app data now. And from this my tables data field, you're going to click new entry, and we're going to set the email to the account on your Make account. So for me, it's josh@optimato.ai. And again, so this would be the account that you're using on Make, right? So basically, it's essentially telling the Bubble app that in this field, this will be the account of the Make account that you're connecting to. So once you've set that, we're going to go back over to settings, and here you'll see that my table data item is now being shown in the data API. You need to check that, and that's going to allow it to be exposed so that Make can connect to it and do a handshake and say, you're all good to go. So once we've got that, we're going to try it again. We're going to click save, and it should connect. Okay, amazing. So now we're connected, and basically what you can do then, I can delete this because we formed the connection, and so we'll use that here in a little bit. But now you can search for things, get things from Bubble, but now that that connection is established, you're basically good to go. So we're going to do that here in a little bit, but I wanted to form that connection first because that's an important part and a little bit confusing. So now that we have the Bubble connection set up, we're going to start building out the make.com scenario where we call Apify, and then we get the transcript and generate a summary. So the first thing I'm going to do after this webhook is I'm going to add a set multiple variables. And this is just good practice to do in Make, just so you can set variables, and if you need to debug, it just allows you to, you can hard code values. We're going to set this one to ID. And basically what I'm doing here is just like creating variables in make and then passing them in here so that I can always reference essentially this module instead of having to always look at the webhook if I need to change something. So we'll set that. And the next thing we need to do is we're going to get the transcript from Apify. So I'm going to add an Apify module. We're going to click Run in Actor. And so the first thing you'll need to do is create an Apify account if you don't have one. So there should be like a create account button over here. Once you go through that process, you'll land on a page similar to this, probably with some sort of starter information. But again, as I mentioned, Apify is just this really cool service that has a bunch of different sort of web scrapers for different platforms. You can build some like really cool tools with this. But again, for our sake, we're going to be looking for a YouTube transcript scraper. So we'll just search YouTube transcript. I'm going to be using this first one, YouTube transcripts by Digital at Scale. So I'll click on that. Once you click on an actor, and an actor is essentially just a kind of really specified sort of web scraper for a specific service. Once you get into it, you'll see some information. So you obviously have a description here, but then you have all these different details about the actual actor itself. But the main one we're going to focus on is this input right here. And so this is essentially just saying like, what data do you need to provide this actor in order for it to scrape YouTube or get a YouTube transcript basically. So in this case, we only need a URL. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run this, because when you run it, it's going to add it into your actors. So let's just run this really quickly. Like I said, it comes with a sort of pre-input YouTube URL. It's going to do its thing. And once it's done, it's going to generate an output. And you'll see that over here. You really don't need to worry about all of this that's happening. This is mainly just to get this sort of set up on your account. So here you'll see the transcript was returned, and that is a good start. So we'll go back over into our make.com scenario. And before all of that, something that we need to do is essentially set up your connection. So I kind of skipped over that part, but over here in Apify, go to settings, go to integrations, and you're going to copy this API token right here, and then go back into make, and for your name your connection if you'd like, paste in that token you just copied. And when you do that, it should create the connection. Once that shows up, you'll see this actor drop down, and you can see Digital at Scale YouTube transcript. So, and that was kind of the main reason of running it just before, so that it would show up in this drop down right here. So the next thing we need to set then is this run synchronously. So basically what this means is when you have run synchronously set to yes, it's going to run that actor. So you saw it kind of took a little bit of time to get that transcript. You can run it and it can wait for data to be returned before it will continue executing the modules following this specific one. Or you can set it to no, and it will sort of initiate that actor, continue to run additional modules, and then you can kind of get that information at a later time, like once that actor has been run. And this is the case for, there are certain times where you might run it and it's going to take a while, but you don't want to block, some of the other workflows or executions that you need to make, where you can then get that data at a later time. And so in this case, we're going to set it to yes, because we want it to do its thing, return us some information so that we can get the data and then continue to generate our summary. The next thing we need to set is this input JSON. So if you go back over to your Apify account, let's go back to actors. We'll go to the YouTube transcript one that we're working with. And right here under input, you'll see manual and JSON. We're going to grab this JSON and we're going to copy it. And essentially, this is just telling it, or it's saying that it needs a URL in order to run. And so we're going to copy this and we'll paste it right into here. And so as we set before, we're passing in a URL from Bubble. We're going to copy everything between the quotes. We're going to delete it out. And then from this set variables, we'll set the URL variable right there. And I think that's basically everything we need. So let's run this. And for now, let's delete this out and let's put in just a YouTube URL really quickly. Again, I'm going to use the same one because it's short. It's a short video. So let's paste this in, click OK. Let's just say we'll run. Actually, hold on. Let's disconnect this one. I'm actually going to just remove this out for the time being. So basically, let's remove that webhook out, and then let's just set this up, and then we'll work that webhook back in, if that makes sense. So let's delete this. So now that we have that variable kind of hard-coded to, and we'll delete this out and remove this. Now that we have that hard-coded, we're going to run that. Now it's going to hit Apify, and you should see it return some information. Amazing. So it looks like it worked. We see the status as succeeded, but I don't actually see the transcript. So the way this works is it's giving you information that we've run it and it's done its job, but it actually didn't return the transcript. So we have to add a second step where we actually need to get the transcript from Apify. So we're going to add another Apify module. This one is going to be called Get Dataset Items. And what it's looking for in order to get that information is a dataset ID. Okay, so in our previous step, we can see down here under options, where is it? Default dataset ID. So that's the value that we want to use. So we'll go back over here in the dataset ID. We'll scroll down until we see it. So default dataset ID. We'll click OK. And so that should be connected. I'm going to go back to this little overflow here. I'm going to copy the dataset ID itself because I want to run this module by itself. And it's going to ask me to set that variable. So we're just going to paste that in. And this just allows me not to have to run the entire scenario. And so if we run that one, we'll see that it returned. And here we can see the actual transcript and all the information that it came back with. Amazing. So the next thing we need to do is then create a summary of that transcript, right? So in this case, we're going to be using OpenAI. And you can use whatever you want, but this one is what I have set up, and so I felt like it would just be quickest. So we're going to do create a completion. Once we do that, if you don't have OpenAI connected, again, what you'll need to do is just go over to, I think it's platform.openai, and then under dashboard, you'll see API keys, create an API key, and then you'll want to essentially do the same thing like we did with Apify, where you add it and paste in that token. So once we've set that up, you're going to select, we'll do GPT-4o because that one is the best at the moment in terms of OpenAI at least. We're going to add a few messages here. So the first one is going to be the system message. And this is essentially where we're just going to provide our instructions for the summary. Basically, I have this prompt over here. If I was doing a real project where I'm doing a summarizer, I'd probably spend a little bit more time on this. But basically, this is just giving some instructions around, you are a summarizer for YouTube videos. You're going to be provided a video transcript and then giving it some instructions on how to essentially generate a solid summary. I also give it some formatting instructions, basically saying that you need to use JSON format. And this is a really key part because we want the model to output its summary in a JSON format so that we can easily save it into the Bubble database. I'll show you what I mean by that here in just a second once we run it. And then just giving it more formatting examples as well as some important details about what to do. So I'm going to copy this and I'll provide this down in the description. There'll be a link to something that will provide that to you. But if we go back to make, we'll paste this into our system message. So there it is. Then if we continue to scroll down, we'll set the second message to user. And I'm going to use brackets here and I'm going to call this video transcript. The reason why I'm doing that is because in my prompt, I tell it that you're getting a video transcript in these like tags. So I'm just gonna kind of continue the pattern here. And then right here in the center of these two brackets is where we're gonna add in this transcript. So we'll just click that. It's gonna insert it between there. Oops, cool. So then once we've got that, we'll set max tokens to like 500. It might be a little bit less, but I'm just trying to move quickly here. And then we're gonna click show advanced settings. I'm gonna actually set the temperature to like, I don't know, so like 0.65. Let's put a 0 there as well. And then the last thing I wanted to say is we're going to set the response format to JSON. And so JSON is just structured output that allows us to save it to the database really nicely. And so we'll be able to parse it and then get it into Bubble. So let's click OK. And now let's run this thing again. Actually, let's see if I can just paste in the transcript really quickly. Okay, so I'm going to grab this. And again, I'm just doing this so I don't have to like keep running this full scenario. But if we go over here, let's say we'll right click it and say run this module only. And again, because we have a transcript variable, it's just asking us what do we want to use for that, for this specific run. And I'm going to click OK. And that should run just the OpenAI module. Okay, so it returned. We should see, what do we have here? So we have result. Nice. And so you can see it's in this sort of structure that I've kind of explained it to provide. If we add another module, we're going to say parse JSON, and this will make a little more sense once we parse it. we're going to parse this result right here. So we'll click that, click OK. And again, I'm going to do the same thing where I'm basically just going to like copy all of this, and hopefully it did it. We'll copy that. We're going to click run this module, and then we're going to paste in what the result would be. So it looks like it was successful. Okay, so here we can see now we have this essentially like a JSON object where it's called a summary. We have an overview. It has its key points broken out just in the way that I've essentially explained it in the prompt, and then the additional details. And so this is super helpful, like I said, as we then start to save things into our Bubble database. It makes it much easier. So that looks great. So we got that set up. So now we need to essentially save things into our Bubble database. So we're gonna go back over to Bubble really quickly. Which one am I using? There we go. So let's go to our database, and we're going to data types. And so we're working with this summary. If we go over, so we have like a video URL that we probably need to save. We have this kind of main summary section, the main takeaways, and then the additional info. Basically, we need to create data fields for all of that. So back in our Bubble app, we're going to create a new type, and we're just going to call this YouTube Summary. We'll click Create. So this is creating a new data thing. We're going to create a few different fields. So I think we should store the URL. So we'll set that as one. That's going to be type text. We'll click create. We're going to create another field called, let's see, we'll call this one overview. And so that's that first paragraph, just kind of explaining the video. We'll set that to text, click create. We'll click key details. That's also going to be text, create. And then I think there's the additional, oh my gosh, can't type. Additional details, do text, create, and I think that's everything. So now that we've created this sort of data item or this data thing, these are all the fields that it contains. We need to go back over to that API tab, and because we created a new sort of data item, we need to check that YouTube summary. So again, this is just exposing it and essentially allowing make.com to access it. If you don't have this checked, you'll get an error on make.com's end, basically saying that it can't find it or it like doesn't exist. And so we also need to remember like how we're referring to this thing. And so let's go back over into make. Let's add our Bubble module. So we're going to click Bubble. We'll say create/update a thing. And I'm going to use the scrape tuba one because I believe that is what I created originally. And the type thing will be YouTube summary. Okay. And the unique ID is essentially what we're going to pass into Bubble when we generate the YouTube transcript. We're going to add a few fields here as well. So we'll say the field name is overview. It's type text, and we're basically just recreating all those fields that we input when we created the data thing, and so it creates that sort of pairing. But for now, we'll just kind of like set some details. So overview, there was additional details, type text, and actually we're not going to set random values. We're going to use this parse JSON, so we can actually set that right there. For the overview, we'll set that right there. We're going to add another item, and that would be our key points. And again, this is how I've spelled it in our Bubble database, so make sure you follow that pattern. We'll set text. We'll set this one to key points. We'll click OK. And basically, last thing is if you don't set a unique ID, this would be how you update a thing. Essentially, when you create something, everything has a unique ID. You can pass that via the webhook, and then that will tell Bubble that you need to update this thing versus create something new, if that makes sense. So just to illustrate that this is working, let's click Run this module only. For the overview, we'll say this is an overview. These are details. And this is a key point. So let's click OK. Once we set that, we got an error. Let's see. Unrecognized key points. Okay, did I spell that incorrectly? There's a good chance. Oh, I say key details. Okay, so let's go back over here to our module. And again, this is, I think, good learning because everything has to map one-to-one in terms of the spelling and the naming. So we'll click OK. Let's try and run this again. Run module only. test, test, test. This is basically just to see if it works. Nice, so we see the green. Amazing, so it looks like it created something. If we go back over into our Bubble app, we go to app data, boom, there it is. So we're creating stuff from make.com, which is amazing. So now we need to piece this all together, right? So we're gonna go back into our front end on Bubble, and we're going to set this up right here. So if you remember, we did just delete out that webhook, so we wanna set that back up. So we'll in make, let's go to add module. Let's do webhook, whoops, webhooks, custom webhook. And I believe I named it correctly, so it should still be in there if you saved it earlier. So just set that one, click OK. And then we're gonna pull this in over here, and we may need to redetermine the structure if I'm not mistaken. Nope, it still has it in there. So this is going to be our URL, perfect. We're gonna add this item for the ID, and we'll set that to ID. Oops, not right there, but right here. Click ID. Okay, amazing. And so again, we're gonna just turn that on for a second, and we're gonna go back over. This thing is listening now. So we're gonna go back over to our Bubble app, and here we have, again, our input and our button. And so we're gonna ask the user to put a URL in, click the button, and we're going to trigger this webhook right here. So on this button, let's click Add Workflow. And what we'll do is, when this button is clicked, we'll go to Plugins, and we'll see our API action that we set up earlier. So send to make.com. If you don't see that, go back to your plugins. And again, this is the thing we set up. You need to make sure use as action is set, and that's essentially going to allow it to show up in the workflows tab over here. And so again, here we have these parameters that we're sending. We're just gonna put our dynamic data into that now. So over in our workflows, we'll go, the URL is going to be the input. So input A. And basically where I'm getting that, if you're not familiar, is like probably better to name this something like input URL. Go back over to the workflow tab. So that would be input URL's value. And the other thing we're going to do here is I want to pass an ID, because essentially the way I'm thinking about it working is when you click the button, it's going to create a data item, and then we're going to pass that ID into make.com, and essentially will allow it to give it the unique ID so it can then update itself when it returns that information. And so let me show you what I mean if that's not clear. Basically, our first step is going to be, we're going to create a thing. So we're just going to create a YouTube summary. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set the URL to that input A's, or the input URL value. Okay. So once that's set, we can actually then, a better practice is to do result of step one. So if the first step was to create a YouTube summary and we set that YouTube URL right there, you can just then pass that into the next step, and that will ensure consistency. So we'll set that to the URL. So this is going to be a result of step one's creating a new YouTube video data thing, the URL that we just stored right there. Okay. So then the next sort of ID is going to be this specific sort of data thing that we've created. It's going to be its unique ID. And so we're going to go back to result of step one. We'll say unique ID. And again, what I'm doing here is I'm creating something, then I'm going to send that ID into make.com so that when I return the data, it's going to know which thing it needs to update. And so we'll see it happen here in just a second. So we've got that set up. And then let's go back over, let's preview this really quickly. So now I'm looking at the app and its live form. So let's get a YouTube URL. Again, I'm just going to keep using this one. Here we go. We're going to paste that in. And before I click hit summary, okay, it is looking. So we're going to see that's listening. We're going to click get summary, and let's see if it works. Okay, sweet. So it sent it. We can see that it's got the URL, the ID, set those variables. It ran through Apify. It's running its magic in OpenAI, it parsed it, now it's sent it back to Bubble. If we go back into Bubble, nice, we'll see that we have all of this information right here. For some reason, it doesn't look like it stored the URL, which is odd, but let me go look at that. Let me try that again. So if we go back over here, so that should have created a new data thing. I just want to see if it actually created the data. Okay, that one saved it. I don't know why the other one did not. But okay, that seems to be working, and then, oh no, it's clearing it out. Oh, because we haven't passed the ID in. Okay. Yes, now I know what's going wrong. Basically right here, we need to set the unique ID because we haven't passed that in, so it's just creating a new element or a new data thing versus updating what we want it to update. So anyways, we'll set that. We'll use the variable one that we've set because that's good practice. We'll click OK. And so from now on, when you essentially run this workflow from here, it should, so use existing data, should run it. Again, we'll run that Apify transcript and we'll update the correct thing. And that's what this is about, mistakes and learning. So now it's doing the summary. Perfect. So if we go back over here, again, we should see this all update itself. If we refresh data, boom. Okay, perfect. So now that we actually have everything connected and it's updating the correct data item, we're going to set it up on the page, okay? So if we go back to our design tab, what we'll do is on this get summary, what I'm gonna do is set a state, and essentially I'm going to store the current sort of data YouTube summary that we've created. I'm gonna store it on the page. And so a custom state is essentially just a way of like storing a temporary value in Bubble. You can do that via element actions. We'll say set state, and we're going to click index, so that's the page we're on, and we're gonna say new custom state. We'll just say current summary. We'll say type is YouTube summary. So this is essentially telling it what type of state you want to create. And so this just allows you to store these YouTube summary data items onto the page. And again, it's just like a temporary way of saving it versus like, in the database, because we just kind of want to set it to our view so that we can update it and show the user. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in just a moment. So the value of this custom state though is going to be result of step 1's create new YouTube video or YouTube summary. Okay. So once that's set, what we'll do then is basically connect in all of these little pieces right here. So we'll start with the text. So if you're not familiar with Bubble, you can essentially set dynamic values to these different elements. And so for summary text, what we're gonna do is we're gonna delete this out here where it says insert dynamic data. I'm gonna select that. I'm going to say index, because that's the name of the page. So I'm gonna say indexes, custom state, current summary, and then I'm gonna call this the overview. And so essentially what that's looking at is of that current page of the YouTube summary we just set on the page, it's essentially going to display any information that's in that sort of overview field, okay? And so we'll do that for the other ones as well. So I'm gonna right click this and click copy expression. And this is just gonna allow me to like add this in really quickly. So I'm gonna delete that out, click insert data. I'll right click right here and click paste expression. So now we can see it's blue, so it's dynamic, but I'm gonna change this to key details, okay? And then on additional info, we'll do the same thing. We'll remove that out, insert dynamic data, right click, paste expression, and then change it to additional details, okay? So let's just see if this is working. So again, what we've done is we've just set the sort of summary that we've created to the page, and then so when it's returned, it's gonna look at those values and essentially put them into these different sort of text elements. So let's try this again. So we have this YouTube URL, we're gonna click get summary. Again, it's doing its thing. I don't think I activated this. So you can turn yours on and that will just automatically run it. But again, I like to watch the modules go. So, okay, running, generating the transcription for the summary. Oops, let's go back. There it goes. Sorry, I kind of missed it. I was hoping to catch it. But basically, we're now capturing those values right here, or we can see them at least, right? And so the next thing we want to do is show that YouTube video, right? So the way we're going to do this is we're going to use a little bit of regex or regex. And that's just a way to essentially isolate the video ID from the URL. So what we'll do here is we're going to say, actually no, we'll say index. So we're going to get the YouTube URL that we stored on the data item, index. We'll say current memories URL. And then we're going to need to extract, essentially, if we click on this, there's a video ID right here that we're going to essentially pull out, but we need to use a regex pattern to get it. If I'm saying that incorrectly, that shows you how non-technical I am. So On this expression that we have here, anything in bubble that's blue is called an expression. So index current summaries URL, we're going to click this last piece of it, and then you'll see this little more action. We're going to click more, and we're going to type in extract with, and we're going to input a pattern here. And I'll paste this in the description as well. I'm essentially grabbing a pattern that I had ChatGPT write for me, where I basically just said I need to isolate this specific ID. And so we're going to go and find that. Where the hell did I put it? There it is. Okay. So I just had ChatGPT write me this. And again, I'll provide it in the description, but there it is. What that's going to do is it's just going to isolate the values after the little video ID parameter. So we'll click close, and then we have to say first item, because essentially it's going to find matches, and you just want to find the first one. And so it'll be indexes, current summaries, URL, extracted with regex, put that pattern in, and then following that, you'll need to set first item, okay? And that should turn blue. So if we do this one more time, we'll get a YouTube video right here. So we'll see the video show up, and this should be not quite running, but we'll do that, use existing data. And there we can see the summary, the key points, and the additional information. And so right there you have a YouTube summarizer here in probably I think it's going to be about 40 minutes long. But again, you can do a lot of things with make.com and Bubble. This is just kind of scratching the surface of how you connect the two. I'm going to leave it at that because again, this video is getting long. We'd obviously want to clean this up a little bit, and we can do that in another video. But let me know if you have questions or if you need help on certain things. I know these tools can be tricky. Hopefully that was helpful, and thanks for watching.